Hello, I thought I'd do a little video here about trips of lifetimes. I mean, I was reading the latest Trout and Salmon, and Alistair Kerr there from Fish Pal was talking about a trip of a lifetime he made to the Atlantic Salmon Reserve in 2018. That amazing time just before the pandemic when everything seemed possible. I mean, I think the funny thing about trips of lifetimes is if you really got into your kind of overseas salmon fishing, for example, you might share what was my experience, which was that I went on my first trip of a lifetime in 2009, and it was meant to be just that, a trip of a lifetime. The thing is, in the long form, it turned out to be the first of several lifetime trips. I mean, if you add up all my trips of lifetimes, uh, you know, you're going to come to a figure in double figures, really. Lucky me, you might say, but then I have scrimped and saved and financed and refinanced and done everything I possibly could to get out to places like Canada, Eastern Canada, that is, Norway, a few times to Norway, the middle part of Norway, Trondelag, the River Gowler. Went there about 6 times in the years from, well, 2009 it was when I first went out there with my great fishing friend Charlie, and right up until my last trip out there before the pandemic. So, and also Russia. I did go out to Russia in the days before it became a really, really difficult thing to do, sadly. So, those are some thoughts I've had. And I wondered if you're going to comment here and feedback, please do. And while you're at it, subscribe and like too, please, because these things really help build up the YouTube, as I'm sure you all know, and the kind of presence and what I'm able to do here. Please feed back to me your own trips of lifetimes and what actually happened in them. So, in the second part of this, I'm just going to talk a little bit about those trips, what happened, and where it sort of took me to the present day. Because the funny thing is, actually, at the moment, I'm fishing much more on my local, not my local river, I think of it as my local river. It is my river where I have some fishing, but it is not the kind of what I call glamorous fishing, of fishing overseas and fishing maybe in the more, how can I put it, fancy parts of Scotland, like the Highlands or whatever. Have been lucky to fish in the Highlands the last 3 years. I fished up on the Carron in 2023 and then again in 2024, both in September. And it was fantastic to fish there. It was a great experience. The social side of that kind of fishing can be great. Staying on a shared trip in a shared house or manse or bothy or a couple of these locations, as we were actually two kind of sub parties to the main group. Actually, on the first year I went, I actually managed to catch no salmon, 1 sea trout, two salmon on, which fell off. Was it two? I think so. Oh yeah, it was two. Um, One of the fish that fell off, we had a little bit of rainwater coming through, and I actually fished so I was so kind of not hard, but I was pretty knacked, and I was actually sitting on this very convenient rock tuft of grass thing on the banks of a pool called Vernon's, if anyone knows the Amet beat of the Carron. And there's a bit of rock coming out, and it creates one of those great funnels of fast water coming through, which the fish, even in good water, will head towards that kind of rushing bit, in the way they know how to do to surge on up to the spawning pool, wherever that may be. And I had actually sat down for a bit, and I was just casting out a fly and fishing in this really relaxed way, and suddenly a pretty nice fish just grabbed the fly, and it was on for about 5 or 6 seconds, long enough so you're actually thinking, fish on, I'm in here, let's play this thing. And then it fell off. Why it did, I've no idea. The hooks were good. The hooks were actually quite big because it was very big water, and I was fishing a bigger tube fly. So that's what happened there. Another one grabbed my fly in the head of a pool called Park, and it just tore off down to the tail of the pool, swinging round to the right bank or whatever in a big kind of arc. And just, I was fishing quite a small treble on that occasion, and it just, boom, it was gone. Bit disappointing, that. But I returned the following year in 2024 and had another crack at it. And things in fish terms went much better. And I was able to catch some salmon, but nothing actually until halfway through the week. We had a bump of rain, and then the fish started to come, mostly to my pal's rods. That's fishing. And eventually, when I caught that first Carron fish, it was just fantastic. We went out before breakfast on the Thursday. The fly came across the bottom of a pool called the Rock, and the fish tipped my fly. It wasn't a big salmon, and it didn't matter. And then, the fish started to come after that. I caught 7 in the end, and it was great fun. It really was great fun, and including some fish on that wonderful fishing day sometimes, which is Friday the 13th. Does anyone get a little bit of a shiver on Friday the 13th, as you set up your rod and you think, well, I'd really better check my knots today, and I'd really better fish something pretty straightforward and pretty attached to a pretty secure hook, that kind of thing. Well, that's what I did, but I was able to catch two really nice fish from a lovely flowing pool called Sandy's, and that was just fantastic. And another one fell off that evening, I think. Another one fell off. It was a small grilse on a switch rod. It just took the fly in really fast, bubbly water and went cavorting off for about, a couple of rod lengths, and just jumped a couple of times and then spat out the hook, But that moment, that fish just was such a happy thing, a magical moment. And the fish stays in my memory, actually, that one. I don't know how to how long to go on this one, because if I go through all my trips of lifetimes, it's going to take not a lifetime necessarily, but a little while. And maybe I'd better keep my powder a bit dry. But perhaps what I will do is just talk about that very first trip, because that very first trip out to the Gala in 2009 was a little bit how it all sort of started. I mean, I was still working on Trout and Salmon magazine at the time. But actually, this trip wasn't a TNS sort of trip or anything. This was a me thing. I had actually been talking to Sandy Leventon at the magazine, and Sandy said to me, I was just thinking about getting a couple of nice days of fishing on the Tweed beats, and not surprisingly saying how flipping expensive the fishing was that I was going for. And Sandy just said, why don't you go to Norway? Because it's going to be about the same, okay, have to get out there. Sort of inclusive of the flights and everything. It's not going to be so much more expensive as a fishing holiday. Cut a long story short, he really hooked me up with Manfred Ragusa, the former owner and founder of the Norwegian Fly Fishers Club, now owned by the Arnebergs, but in those days it was Manfred. And I went out with my pal Charlie, and it was the most incredible trip. It was end of season. It was low key in a way. I mean, we turned up at the hotel in Storen. I mean, we were obviously super excited, really having a nice time. I do remember we were very hungry, actually. We got to this hotel and there was no one around because they'd all gone fishing. And it was a Sunday, actually, and you can fish on a Sunday in Norway. We got there, and the first thing we did is we went off and bought probably the most expensive pizza I've ever bought in my life, which was about 42 quid. I remember that. It was also one of the biggest pizzas I've ever bought in my life. And Charlie and I sat at this table. Between us, we ate half the pizza. This is how big it was. And we were hungry. And we couldn't eat anymore. So we kind of packaged the rest up in a doggy bag, and it kept us going the next day or two on the river. But that was Storen. That was out at, I suppose, the middle Gala. And we went out and fished in that wonderful river, which has wonderful, wonderful fly fishing water. And it was one of those great things where, I mean, we eventually found some guys, Daniel, Stefan, Manfred, Tees Reamers, brilliant people like that. And we got our fishing licenses sorted and disinfecting the tackle and all those sort of bits of important stuff you have to do, and found out which beats we were on. And we fished away, and actually caught my first Norwegian salmon halfway through the week from Renna Pool on one of Ross McDonald's park shrimps. I'm sure some of you know about Ross, and I'm sure you know about his park shrimp, which he invented, I presume, from the park beat of the Lower D, Aberdeenshire D. And he actually tied it for me at one of the Kelso angling fairs one year, and it looked really big then. I thought, that's a big old fly. It looks fantastic, but I'll just have to think about when I'm going to use that one. I used it in the very fast waters flowing into Renna Pool. Fished it down in this nice late August, still very silver fish of about 14 pounds. Hammered it, grabbed it as soon as it hit the water, and on a floating line, intermediate line. And bang, fish on. And I remember I'd just been fishing down the pool after Charlie. He was just getting on with the middle part of the pool where it goes under the magic wires. Why is it always that the water flowing under electricity wires, whatever, that cross a pool can be such a good spot? I don't know. Anyway, he was there and I was up at the top. I'd gone in quite high, right up into the fast water. And I remember I just couldn't say anything. I had this fish on and I couldn't speak. It just took my words, I suppose, pure adrenaline. Actually, the fish took me straight round a rock in the middle of the river, but it's a Gowler rock. Great thing about those are they are kind of small, round, I mean, big, rounded rocks. And once it was on there, I was able to wade out a bit and kind of get it off the rock. And this fish came in, and this little, quite not a huge double hooked double hook in the back of the park shrimp was actually only, just like one of the hooks, whatever, in the middle upper mouth jaw. It would have been the left hand, wouldn't it? It was. And there it was, and we returned the fish. All the fish go back there. It was a great moment. It was, and that started a love affair with the Gala. Anyway, I'm going to stop now. Wish you all a Merry Christmas. I hope you have a fantastic break. I hope you're starting to think about, or you already have booked some fishing for 2026. And I wish you all tight lines next year. Have fun. Enjoy your fishing and your lives. Goodbye.